Blessings, everyone. This is Oliver from People's Awakening, and thank you so much for being present, for tuning in as we explore conscious relationships. You know, it's such an important topic and idea right now, which are conscious relationships. And within those conscious relationships, we're going to be exploring and talking about how to manage conflict when it arises in a conscious, aware, and heart-centered way. Because I think so many people are feeling the immense amounts of energy that's coming into the planet right now, or coming out of the planet right now. And what happens when all these powerful energies are moving through us, especially when they're moving through us when we're in a relationship, is these energies have the ability to kind of call things up. You know, it's almost like fights are more likely to happen, or triggers are most likely to happen, because this is a natural kind of expression of what happens when energy is rising, frequency is rising. And that's why relationships are such an important part of our alchemy as we grow and as we develop as people and as human beings. Because relationships are these beautiful containers where we really get to learn about ourselves. We get to see the deepest aspects of ourselves. And we really get to see, you know, kind of what's going on inside us. You know, what programs are present, what belief systems are present, what patterns are present. So I really love, you know, how relationships can help us develop a better relationship with ourselves. And this is really the aspect, you know, of what conscious relationships are. Conscious relationships are when there's a partnership. You know, when you're in a partnership where both partners are committed to growth and transformation and expansion. So you take the idea of conscious relationships where both partners are committed to the idea of growth and transformation. And then you add into all these powerful energies that are coming to the planet right now. It's like throwing a spark in a really dry pile of leaves. You know, it's going to set everything ablaze in really beautiful ways, because it's going to purify, it's going to burn away all the things that no longer serve us and add clarity into ourselves and into the relationships. And I think so many of you out there have seen what happens, you know, when conflict and fights arise in a relationship. Because let's face it, you know, when everything is going really well in the relationship, you know, when you're in love and both partners are happy, it's so easy to keep your heart open. You know, it's really easy to stay in a loving place, in a place where everything just feels good and in bliss. But something really interesting happens is when you're in a relationship and conflict arises, suddenly all the things inside us get pulled out. You know, all of those patterns, all of those belief systems, all those ways of being that normally we can suppress or forget about when we're so happy. When we get in conflict in the relationship container, it starts pulling out all these things within us, sometimes things we didn't even realize were there. And that's one of the most beautiful things about relationships, you know, because they have the ability to, again, you know, going back to relationships are such beautiful mirrors, such beautiful ways of getting to know ourselves more. So in a conscious relationship, you know, when conflict arises, you know, when fights arise, when constriction and contraction, you know, will come through a relationship, it's such a beautiful thing to learn the art, almost the yoga of how to manage conflict in healthy ways. It's really about taking, you know, a negative situation that might arise in the relationship and drawing it into a positive outcome, like seeing it as not just this awful, uncomfortable thing that, you know, that's what fights are, that's what conflict are. It's learning to have a new perspective when conflict arises and seeing it as a beautiful catalyst and portal for growth to develop in the relationship. So that's why I felt so called to really, you know, come on this live broadcast with all of you and share a little bit about why it's so important to look at conflict as almost hidden golden nuggets that we can really utilize to help the relationship grow and start to develop, you know, this capacity within us to stay open, to stay heart-centered as we move through these conflicts in the relationship, and see that they'll actually move from, you know, just being this negative, uncomfortable thing we don't want to deal with into these beautiful ways that we can become more loving of a partner in ourselves and create such strength for the container in our relationship. So it's a wonderful thing right now to cultivate this, because what's happening is not only as we cultivate the ability to handle conflict in beautiful, heart-centered ways, it will benefit the relationship, but one of the best things that it will do is it actually starts adding to the energy of the planet in mitigating and managing conflict on a collective scale for the entire planet, and also for the collective masculine and the collective feminine, because the more we individually do this type of work, the more it's going to benefit the collective masculine and the collective feminine, finding this beautiful union within us. So thank you guys so much for tuning into this broadcast, and I want to let anyone know if you have any questions that come up, or if you'd like some advice or some perspective. I'm certainly not a master, I'm certainly not a teacher on this, but I would be so humbly grateful to offer some feedback to anything you might be going through right now, whether it's a question or an experience you have, relating to conscious relationships, or maybe something that's coming up inside yourself or with your partner right now. So one of the things that I find so important as we explore the idea of conflict in a conscious relationship is the idea of moving from what would be a reaction into a response mentality. So if you think about the difference between what reacting is and what response is, it really comes down to a level of awareness, a level of capacity of presence. Because think about a time when your partner might have done something that triggered you, and the response that came out of that trigger was so automatic. It's almost like you didn't think about it, you didn't even have time to process it. When this trigger came in, when this stimuli came in from your partner, it automatically generated a reaction. And sometimes you don't even know where it came from. It just, you might be yelling, you might be angry, you might shut down. And this is what reaction is really about. It's this almost unconscious, this automatic program that responds to something in a certain way that's usually based around some type of habit or pattern that we might have. So what we're doing is we want to start to move out of this reaction place and into response. And response is really about that awareness, that cultivation of presence, where choice starts to come in. Because there's this beautiful point, I like to call it the trigger point, when something will come into our field. If we're talking about relationships and what this looks like, it's like if your partner does something that comes into your field, there's a point where it comes into your being, and then it gets transmuted and transformed into a response that comes out of you, whatever that response might be. So what I love teaching about and bringing awareness to is this trigger point. And when we're in reaction mode, this trigger point, we're not even aware of it. We're not even aware of this process that happens when something comes into our field, and then we have a reaction to it. So when we start to get out of reaction into response, what happens is we start drawing in this awareness to this trigger point. So when something comes into us that would normally trigger us, instead of just generating this automatic fast trigger reaction, what we're doing is we're starting to draw some presence and some space in to say, okay, how is this thing making me feel? And instead of just automatically reacting in a certain way, I'm going to start to work with this emotion. I'm going to be like, oh wow, I'm feeling pissed off right now, or I'm feeling hurt right now, or I'm feeling scared right now. But before we automatically react from that place, we're going to take the time to sit with it, whether it's 1 second, 1 minute, 1 day, 1 week, whatever it needs to be for you to really process this emotion. We're starting to draw awareness where there's a choice. There's a choice that comes into the trigger point that we don't necessarily have to automatically react to something. And especially we don't have to negatively react to something that is a negative thing that came into our field. So it's, if something negative comes into our field, we actually have the option not to respond in a negative way or react in a negative way. And this is the power of response, where we can actually see that within us there's this beautiful alchemical process when something comes into our field that we can transmute it from being something negative or anger related, who knows what it is, we can actually transform it back into love. And this is one of the fastest ways that I've noticed that a lot of my conflicts in my past relationships and other partnerships that I've noticed is that there tends to be either a positive cycle of conflict or a negative cycle of conflict. And what I mean by that is, think maybe you've had this experience in a fight where one partner will say something and then the other partner will say something even more negative, which will then make the other partner react and say something even more negative. And it creates this downward spiral where it's just like one person being mean, back and forth, blame, you name it. It goes into this really interesting downward cycle where it's just one negative thing leading to another negative thing, leading to another negative thing. And this is, again, you get stuck in this reaction mode, this unconscious mode. So when we start to bring awareness into this trigger point, we start to shift it from being a reaction into a response. So if something negative comes into our field, we actually have the ability just to be present with it, to be calm with it, to not automatically react. to bring some presence and respond to it. And if we can transmute that thing into a positive response, it will stop so many downward cycles of fights. Because usually fights, oftentimes are from assumptions or expectations or misunderstandings. But the fight can be so, kind of amplified when it goes into this back and forth blame game, defense, denial, anger, back and forth. And imagine what would happen if suddenly one partner stopped this angry cycle, this negative downward cycle. So many fights would be alleviated. So many amazing things could transform in the process of this conflict, where instead of just being this back and forth negativity, suddenly one partner says, okay, it stops with me. I understand this is a trigger, not saying one person's right, not saying one person's wrong. There's no blame, there's no judgment, but to have the capacity as a partner with you to step up and to say, okay, this type of negativity stops with me. This type of negativity stops in me, and I'm going to find the presence within inside myself to love this person, because really you're in a partnership with this person that you love, or at least that's the goal of most partnerships, is you're with someone you truly care about and love. So the fight really needs to be boiled down into the truth of what's happening. And if there's so much anger and if there's so much emotional charge happening, it's tough to get to the truth of it. And it's tough to have each partner feel heard, to feel seen, to feel safe, again, if this emotional trigger and intensity keeps going. So I really encourage, not just figuring out who's right and who's wrong, because that actually can be secondary. It's about creating a safe space. It's about creating a safe space for both partners to feel seen, to feel heard, to feel present, to feel safe. So that happens really quickly when one partner, again, finds themselves in a place of capacity to say, okay, this negative cycle stops with me. And this is the trigger point. This is the movement from reaction to response. And, I used to look at it almost, I would trick my ego into working for me. I would trick my ego into working for my heart, where I'd create these scenarios that I had with past partners where I would say, okay, I'm challenging myself to be the first one to get into a loving state, because the ego loves competition and loves winning, and that's usually why blame games and defenses happen in relationships. Imagine if you flipped it and used your ego in the ways that it likes to operate in competition and that type of thing, but programmed it to do a positive thing. And that's one of the biggest ways I shifted it, was I wanted to be the first partner to get into a loving state, which is really funny because what happens is the ego loves to compete, but the competition, if you win this competition, it creates a loving, harmonious space. So I'd challenge myself. I'd be like, okay, can I stay in a loving space? Regardless of whether I thought my partner was wrong or right, or I was wrong or right, I would just be like, okay, I want to be the partner that stays in love. I want to challenge myself and win the competition to find my heart center again. And so I do all these different scenarios where I change these patterns. And the amazing thing that happened, I would say 9 times out of 10, is that there wasn't even anything legitimate to the fight. It had something to do with assumptions, expectations, misunderstandings in the relationship that can so easily and readily be healed and clarified if we just have the capacity not to be in this charged state where one little thing can start a fight again, or again, we're getting in blame or we're closing down. And this is the next part about reaction versus response, is the ability to stay open in a fight. And I will, be the first one to admit I'm such a novice at this. And I think a lot of men tend to be. I think what I've noticed is it's easier for women to stay open in relationships, but certainly not universal. There's plenty of women that embody these qualities, and certainly many men who embody the opposite, staying open qualities. But what I mean by that is there's a certain level of contraction. There's a certain level of constriction and closing down when conflict in relationship happens, and I could say, my past is when conflict arises, I would find myself shutting down. I would get into defensive mode. It's like I felt my partner was like trapping me, and I was like, no, I'm shutting down. I'm not talking anymore. I will just be defensive. Maybe I'll even throw out some blames toward you. So the nice thing about moving into this response area versus reaction area when conflict arises is it generates the ability for us to really get into that place of staying open, especially when we want to close down during conflict, especially when we want to stay shut and not deal with these emotions and not feel this intensity. Because what happens when you start to shut down is you're actually disconnecting from your partner. And for your partner's point of view, it doesn't feel good to have you're physically present in the room, but you're not emotionally or heart there. It's almost like you're just a statue of yourself. And so your partner's going to feel you shutting down, which is certainly not going to help the conflict. And the next thing is you're shutting down. You're not allowing this emotional energy to process through you. You're not allowing the presence and the capacity for this awareness to flow into you. So when you shut down, you're shutting down the entire possibility of positive resolution to come from that relationship. And I know a lot of you might be thinking like, well, maybe it's just too intense to handle at that time, and that's very valid. But instead of shutting down, try and find within you the courage and the capacity to then ask for space, to instead of just getting into reaction mode and blame mode and exploding or just shutting down and being silent. Imagine the difference if you're like, look, there's a lot moving and a lot happening in this fight right now. And again, you might not say it as calmly as I am, but the point is to communicate something along the lines of, this is really intense for me. I'm not in a place where I can handle this in a mature way. I'm not in a place where I can handle this in a calm way. I'm not thinking clearly. I'm not feeling clearly. I'm caught up in the energy of this conflict. So it's really important that you communicate, be like, look, I need a break from this right now. I want to get back in a place where I can find my heart, where I can feel my love and appreciation for you, and I can handle this in a mature, anchored, grounded, positive way. And communicate that in any way you need. And again, it probably will come out a little bit more emotionally charged than that. But get that point across to your partner. And I find, with my partners, I'll actually have a talk before a fight happens, when things are great, to be like, hey, when fights arise, when conflict arises, there probably will be a lot of times that I'm not going to be in my Shiva, in my mature, masculine, aware, conscious presence. And if I need the fight to stop, if I need us to take a break at that point, then please allow me to have this space. And also, I'm promising that I will give you the space too when you need it, if you can't respond in a healthy way. And so it's great, instead of shutting down, and if you can't stay open, if you can't be a partner that remains in a heart open state, then ask for that space. Take a minute, take 10 minutes, take a day if you need to. But the point is to come back into the space in a calm, peaceful, centered place. And it's a really valuable tool to do that if you can't stay in that calm, centered place, take a break. Just take a nice break. Go into yourself. What I like to do is I like to go for a walk in nature, in the woods, because I just feel, that emotional energy ground out of me. And then before I know it, I'm like, oh, wow, I can see, what contributed to this conflict, in a much more clear way. And more importantly is I can find the words to articulate my feelings, because I know, as a man kind of growing up, I was, not taught to process my emotions in really healthy ways, or I was taught to process my emotions in unhealthy ways. It's something that men seem collectively not to have a lot of emotional education, and especially how to process our emotions. So I find by, asking for, space, just to be like, look, I can't handle this right now. I need to collect my thoughts. I need to get back in a healthy place. By being alone, by becoming more resourceful again, I can articulate my feelings, I can process my feelings, because you tend not to process and understand your feelings as clearly when they come up in the moment, when they're fresh and ripe in the moment. So by taking that space and going for a walk, or just collecting yourself, taking a breath, whatever you need, it can really work wonders in staying open and contributing to the openness and coming back together in positive ways. And so this is really such a beautiful way of creating more trust in the relationship. Again, when you start to master the ability, and for me, it's going to be a lifelong course. Other people can get it already, and I'm sure thank you to all the beautiful couples who have this already. So to be able to master the ability to move out of reaction and then move into this conscious response type mentality, so many fights can be moved through so quickly. So many conflict-oriented situations can be transmuted into something positive in a relationship. And one of the coolest parts about this is such trust is then born in the relationship, because your partner starts to see in you that they can trust you to bring their storms, to bring their rages, to bring, when they need to be emotionally, authentically angry or whatever it might be, they know that they can trust you to remain in a heart-centered place. And if you can't, then to ask for the break. And the same thing is that you'll start to trust your partner to do the same thing for you. So it becomes, this process process of independently, doing it for yourself as a partner, but then the relationship starts to develop these skills where one partner can help the other partner. And suddenly you're in this like almost Zen Buddha-like conflict where you're just like, I'm feeling this, I want to express honestly how I'm feeling. Can you handle my truth? Don't try and fix the problem. Don't try and figure out who's right or wrong. Can you handle my truth? And then the other partner will be like, yes, I can handle your truth right now. I'm feeling it. Thank you for sharing. Here's how I feel. And then, of course, that's a very Zen Buddhist monk style way. But also you'll know, be like, look, I'm feeling this way right now. I'm feeling this energy right now. And if one partner says, I can't handle this, this is too intense, both partners can take their space and then come back once they're ready. So it's such a beautiful process of moving out of reaction into response. So this is how I've been finding, this is a great way to build trust. Because again, remember, so many intense energies are coming to the planet right now. And we as human beings upon this planet, we're in many ways acting as a step-down transformers for these really intense energies coming in. And a lot of these energies that are coming to the planet right now and are coming to humanity right now, their goal is to cause integration. Their goal is to cause a rapid integration in our field. And, integration sounds great, and it sounds this divinely oriented, holistic way of becoming whole. But really what happens is when this energy of integration comes in, all the things that are maybe not harmonious, not integrated, not healed within our being, they start to come out. And again, so when you're in relationships and you're going through this process of rapid integration and rapid expansion as a being, and in the container of the relationship and both partners are going, again, this is causing, a lot of opportunities for conflict to arise. So it's so important to start to develop these skills in a conscious relationship of seeing, what's happening as each partner is transforming, and to see beyond the symptoms of that transformation, to see beyond the triggers and the angers or the things that might get released as each partner transforms, and to hold a space of love for your partner. So hold a space of compassion for your partner, and to really not take things personally. And this brings up another such a key point about this is, don't take things personally. This should be a mantra for a lot of people, because again, whether your partner is angry about something unrelated to you or related to you, is that if you can hold this space of not taking it personally and seem like, no, my partner just needs to get this out. My partner needs to allow this energy to pass through. And when we cannot take it personally, we're not going to get defensive about it. We're not going to be like, well, you said this about me? Oh, well, then this is about you and blah, blah, blah. Because we're getting emotionally charged by our partner's sharing. And when we start to develop the capacity just to receive our partner's truth, it doesn't have to be our truth. It doesn't have to make sense to us. But when we have this ability within us to, really receive our partner's truth and really receive them in how they're feeling authentically in that moment, we're allowing them to then have them trust us to receive their truth, and we're encouraging them to always be themselves in every moment. And I love this idea because it's really a form of dishonesty if you're trying not to authentically be yourself in a partnership for whatever reason, especially if you feel like your partner can't handle your authentic expression. So it's such a beautiful thing to cultivate within us, the ability to encourage our partner to always be their authentic self, to always be able to share their authentic feelings, their authentic thoughts, the energies that are flowing through them, and really cultivate in you the capacity as a partner to hold them in that, to really feel them in that, to have safety come about where I know I can be myself and my partner can handle me. And I trust her enough that if she can't handle me in positive and healthy ways, that she'll ask for the space, or she'll ask that I find a different channel to process this with. And that's why it brings up the idea of resourcefulness. And, this is self-responsibility. This is self-reliance. This is about self-care. It's that you want to become resourceful as a partner. Because when we get into these depleted states, think about what depletion is. It's when you're tired, when you're sore, when you're cranky, when you've got a lot going on. And it's like having a gas tank that's empty. The car is not going to run well. And this is what happens in relationships. And I've seen it all the time in my past life, in past relationships in my life, and also I see it a lot in other relationships, is that one or both partners will become depleted because they're not taking care of themselves and they're not coming into overflow and resourcefulness. That triggers are more likely to happen. Fights are more likely to happen. So this is so important to get into a space where we can maintain a level of resourcefulness and overflow. And by having this resourcefulness and overflow, we're more likely to handle negative situations in positive ways. And this is a great opportunity when conflict arises to honestly check in with yourself and see if a lot of how you're reacting and how you're feeling is really just your own depletion, your own lack of resourcefulness, where you can't respond to this in healthy ways. And this is just a natural part of being human, being in a relationship. Is if you're tired, you're not going to respond in necessarily the happiest ways, or if you're sick, or if your body's in agony, whatever it might be. Really encourage you out there to take self-care seriously and to take resourcefulness seriously in the relationship, and to make sure that you're always getting resourceful so that your partner doesn't have to trigger something in you to realize you're in a depleted state. So get resourceful, and this is why I bring this up, because oftentimes if your partner is going through something and you don't have the capacity to handle it or to hold space for it, to have the ability to honestly say, look, what you're going through is so far beyond what I can handle right now, that I really want to encourage you to get the support and get the space held that you need. And to allow your partner to find that space being held wherever, whether it's a therapist, other friends, brothers or sister circles, whatever it might be, is to get that support in order to come back into that resourcefulness, and to see not every fight and every source of energy has to be processed directly through the relationship. Is that I know I've been to so many brothers gatherings and brother circles that I went in there with relationship issues and relationship drama, and just by being in a space with other men, so much of it just cleared. I felt held. I felt my brothers with the strength to hold me in all my emotions, and I came out of it. I'm like, I'm not even angry anymore. It ended up helping me see it was a lot of my shit. It was a lot of my own issues that were getting projected onto my partner. And by becoming resourceful and getting space held and getting support outside of the relationship allowed me again to find that clarity, to move out of reaction into response again. So take the responsibility to really become resourceful and find your ways of self-care, find your ways of self-responsibility, getting back into that overflow. It'll make such a huge difference in the relationship. So these are just some of key areas that I've been going through lately, and I wanted to share with all of you. And before I end this broadcast, and I promise there'll be more coming, especially about this topic of conscious relationships. And I'm sure there's a lot. It's an endless category that we could go through when it comes to managing conflict. But if anyone out there listening has any questions, or if they want to share something, or if they'd like some feedback, please feel free to ask now before I have to go. But I just want to say thank you all for really just tuning in and for receiving some of this. And really what I love about this type of broadcast is it becomes in many ways where we're in a giant support group together. We get to hear each other's perspective and feel each other's perspective. And for me, when I share about these things, it helps me gain more perspective. It helps me feel courageous enough to become vulnerable. And that's really the paradox of relationship strength is a lot of times people find that the less they feel, the stronger they are, when it's actually the opposite. Is the more we're able to feel, the more vulnerable that we can become, the stronger we become as partners. The more confident and capable we are in our vulnerability, the more likely we can stay open when conflict comes up. I mean, this is such an important thing that I can't stress enough and remind you enough, is that it is through vulnerability that we build up the capacity to handle emotional energy as it comes through us. And the more we're able to do that, the more we can hold space for ourselves, and the more we can hold space for our partner. So it's through our own ability to feel so deeply that our heart space and our emotional body becomes so strong that we can handle the storms that might come up in relationships, that we can handle these emotional waves that rise through our relationships without shutting down, without pushing our partners away, or without us running away. So learning how to become vulnerable, learning how to become so confident in our own emotional energy will completely transform how we show up for our partners, and how deeply we can take the relationship. Because this is the area of trust that's so, so, so important, is that the relationship can only go to the depth where each partner can handle that type of intensity. It's like, think when you're traveling to the bottom of the ocean, the pressure is getting so deep, so deep, so much, so strong, that if you're not strong enough, if you don't have a strong enough submarine or whatever submersible is going down, if the relationship container isn't strong enough, if each partner's capacity to handle emotional energy isn't strong enough, the pressure from going to the depths of the relationship will crush the container. It will crush the partners. So this is why this idea of strengthening our ability to handle conflict, from becoming self-reliant, from becoming resourceful and in overflow, and strengthening our ability to be vulnerable and to be able to feel and to manage how we feel when we feel. That's a key one right there, is how we feel when we feel. Can we handle our feelings in positive ways? It is because it's going to create the capacity for true depth to be created in the relationships. And there won't be anything that you can feel, and there won't be anything your partner can feel that will throw the relationship off balance. That's the goal. Where you become super conductive to the most powerful emotional energies that the universe could possibly deliver to you, both good and bad, positive and negative, love, anger, fear-oriented, you name it. You can handle the spectrum. The relationship becomes full spectrum. So when you're going to the depths of the relationship, when you're going into the true expanse of the relationship, when there's all this pressure that would normally crush the container of the relationship, you've done the work, your partner's done the work, and you've strengthened the container of that relationship so much it could go to the bottom of the ocean and be fine. And this is the beauty of it. This is where relationships can go. This is the aspect of conscious relationships that will be world-shaking, that will be collectively transforming everything. When true partnership between the masculine and the feminine can move and evolve and unify in such a way that nothing will break that bond. Your partner will feel it. You will feel it. The relationship will become a lighthouse and a source of inspiration for everyone else, because when a relationship has that type of power, when a relationship has that type of heart strength and heart awareness, people feel that. People crave that. That's what everyone wants. Everyone wants to be met at the deepest layers of who they are. And imagine a relationship like that. And this is where the trust of being able to handle the negative aspects of the relationship, the conflict of the relationships. When you develop this ability, it shows that anything can be handled. And it stands as an example of what we're doing now, healing the collective wounds that have taken place between the masculine and the feminine, from the masculine to the feminine, from the feminine to the masculine. We're healing that first inside ourselves. And then we're bringing this beautiful, integrated, healed centeredness as an individual partner, and we're bringing that into the relationship. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. Thank you for hearing this, for receiving some of these messages, and really allowing me just to express what I'm feeling in this moment. And hopefully some of this will benefit your relationship and help you become more resourceful and more centered in yourself and in your relationship. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to visit my website, awakeningmasculine.com, where there'll be some resources, some video. I have a YouTube channel that you can visit. And also, I love doing sessions, both for men, for women, and for couples. So if you feel like you're moving through some big energies right now and you could use a little bit of support, you could use a little guidance and some space held for you, I'd be so honored to step up and to hold that space and to offer coaching sessions to you. So you can find all this information right on my website, awakeningmasculine.com. And thank you again for being here. And this is what we're here to do. We're here to master ourselves. And then when we bring our self-mastery into our relationship, the world will be set ablaze with the type of love that will naturally and effortlessly pour out of conscious relationships. And this is the energy that will fully heal and bring this world back together. Thank you so much. And again, please feel free to send me a message. You can find me on my Facebook page, Awakening Masculine, or visit my website, awakeningmasculine.com. And thank you again for receiving this message. And I love you guys, and sending so much love from here in Bali.